Hi everyone, this is Kyle with Rosetta Tones, and welcome back to the third video in our Deciphering Music Theory series, during which we'll be taking a look at intervals. Intervals are often described as the building blocks of music, and are basically the musical version of the alphabet. Intervals are how we build larger patterns such as scales, chords, and melodies, and can be described in several ways. The most general way to describe an interval is whether it is consonant or dissonant. Consonant refers to how at rest something feels. If you listen to these two notes, they're pleasant to listen to. There really isn't any tension between them. Even darker sounds like this don't feel tense. They don't feel like they need to go anywhere. Dissonant intervals are very tense and feel like they need to resolve. Resolution is moving from something that is dissonant to something consonant. One of the most dissonant intervals is the tritone, which really needs to resolve somewhere, like this. Dissonance and consonance is more of a spectrum than a hard line, with some intervals being very consonant, some very dissonant, and the rest falling somewhere in between. An interval has a number associated with it which tells us how big it is. These numbers can technically go to infinity, but we mainly use 1 through 7. When two notes are on the same line or space, we use the number 1. If one note is on a line and the other is on the space right above it, we use 2. If one note is on a space and the next note is on the space above it, we use 3, and so on. Before we go on, there are two intervals we need to know that help with understanding the rest of them. These are the minor and major second. You may have also heard these referred to as half steps and whole steps. The minor second is the distance from one note to the next closest note. If we take a look at a piano, this would be moving from a white key to the closest black key, or a black key to the closest white key. Remember that although there are no black keys in between E natural and F natural, and B natural and C natural, that these are still considered half steps. This applies if you were starting from the upper note and descending. Also remember that moving from E to F sharp, B to C sharp, E flat to F, or B flat to C is considered a whole step. This also applies if you were starting on the upper note and going downwards. Intervals can also be referred to by a name that precedes the number. These include major, minor, perfect, augmented, and diminished. Let's take a look at major and minor first. Only certain intervals can be labeled major or minor. These are intervals that have the number 2, 3, 6, or 7. As mentioned before, the minor second is equal to 1 half step, and the major second is equal to 2 half steps. The minor third is made up of 3 half steps, such as B flat to D flat, or F sharp to A, and it sounds like this. The major third is made up of 4 half steps, such as C flat to E flat, or F to A. It sounds like this. The minor sixth is made up of 8 half steps, such as C to A flat, or G to E flat. It sounds like this. The major sixth is made up of 9 half steps, such as F to D, or B flat to G. It sounds like this. Finally, the minor seventh is made up of 10 half steps, such as E flat to D flat, or B natural to A. It sounds like this. The major seventh is made up of 11 half steps, such as B flat to A, or F to E, and it sounds like this. Next are perfect intervals. We can only call something a perfect interval if it is a 1, 4, 5, or 8. 1 is often referred to as a unison, and an 8 is often referred to as an octave. A perfect unison is the same note, so there are no half steps in between. This would be 2 G's on the same line, or 2 C's on the same space. An octave is 2 of the same note, but one note is 12 half steps higher than the other. An example would be A flat to A flat, or F to F. Unisons and octaves sound like this. The perfect fourth is made up of 5 half steps and could include F to B flat or D to G. The fourth sounds like this. The perfect fifth is made up of 7 half steps and includes E flat to B flat or C to G. It sounds like this. Next are diminished and augmented. These can apply to every interval and are a little tricky. It's important to remember that how many lines and spaces apart two notes are determines its interval number, but not necessarily the number of half steps. First, let's start with perfect intervals. If a perfect interval is raised 1/2 step, that makes it an augmented interval. For example, normally C to G is a perfect fifth. If we raise the G to a G sharp, we now have an augmented fifth. Although the augmented fifth has the same number of half steps as a minor sixth, because C and G are written as 2 lines apart, we have to label it as a fifth. A sixth would be 2 lines and a space apart. If we had the note F and F sharp, this would be an augmented unison. Here's what an augmented unison sounds like. An augmented fourth, an augmented fifth, and an augmented octave. It's also important to remember that the note name does not have to have a sharp in it to be an augmented interval. In the case of B flat to E natural, we have an interval with a value of a fourth. However, we know that B flat to E flat is a perfect fourth. Therefore, B flat to E natural is an augmented fourth. The same idea applies to diminished intervals. If we have notes that are spelled as perfect intervals but are a half step lower, they are called diminished. If we have the note B to B flat, we can see this is an octave because both notes have a B in their name. Since the second note is flatted, we know that this interval is a diminished octave. Here's what a diminished unison sounds like. A diminished fourth, a diminished fifth, and a diminished octave. Major and minor intervals can be augmented or diminished as well. If you take a major interval and raise it 1/2 step, it now becomes augmented. On the other hand, if you take a minor interval and lower it 1/2 step, it becomes diminished. C natural to E natural is a major third. If, however, we made the E natural an E sharp, it would then become an augmented third. C natural to E flat is a minor third. But if we lowered the E flat to an E double flat, it would then become a diminished third. Remember that although E double flat and D natural are the same sounding note, since C and E are written 1 line apart, they are called a third. C natural and D natural would be a second, since they are 1 space apart. This concept applies to the rest of the major and minor intervals. C to A natural is a major sixth, but C to A sharp is an augmented sixth. On the other hand, C to B flat is a minor seventh, but C to B double flat is a diminished seventh. This naming system applies not only for intervals going upwards, but downwards as well. I usually find it easier to look from the bottom to the top, since the name will stay the same regardless of the direction. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this useful. If you would like some practice with naming intervals, feel free to click on the link in the description to some practice worksheets for interval identification, including an answer key. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop a comment below or send me a message.